Today we're going to be talking about 10 different terms that you need to know as a tea drinker, specifically with loose leaf Gongfu tea. If you don't know what Gongfu tea is, don't worry, we'll give you that one in a minute. Hey everyone, my name is Dardalan from Favorite Teaware. On this channel, we do teaware education, sometimes tea education, like in this video, podcasts around tea, and tea reviews. What is Gongfu style tea? So Gongfu style tea was invented in a small city called Chaozhou. The main thing you need to know here is they're flash steeps, with 15 to 30 second steeps to start off and several steeps while you're going through your drinking process with these smaller pots. But don't worry, we can talk more about that later. So number one, a tisane. So tisane or tisane literally just means herbal tea in French. And what this is any tea that is not from a Camellia sinensis plant. The distinction of if a tisane is a tea or not isn't really as important as it is for classification so that people understand what they're getting with a tea. 99% of tisanes are not gonna have caffeine in them. So some common tisanes that you may know of are gonna be chamomile, mint, hibiscus, rooibos, chai. Most of the time, if someone's looking for a sweeter tea that you're gonna add sugar to that's not gonna be caffeinated for right before bed, a tisane is gonna be your best choice. Next we have steep or brew. This is one that I really didn't think about, people not really knowing what it is. So steeping is really just the process and the time in which the tea leaves are in a teapot or in a mug. We don't always steep our teas. A lot of times when you buy single serve tea, well, there's no tea that's in it. There's no tea or tea bag. Most oftentimes in the West, if we are steeping tea, it's gonna be a tea bag in a coffee mug and we're gonna steep it for 3, 4, 5 minutes, or maybe just leave the tea bag in it the whole time. The reason that this is important when we're brewing tea Gongfu style is because if you leave the tea bag in for too long, it's going to oversteep and oftentimes become astringent. That astringency isn't ideal as it ruins the flavor of the tea and takes away from future session. Hence why the word steep becomes much more important when brewing tea Gongfu style. Next we have a Gaiwan, like this one, or Gaiwan. This is an alternative to a traditional shaped teapot and makes it easier to get the leaves in and out. Traditionally, a Gaiwan is comprised of 3 parts: the gaizi, or lid, the wan, or bowl, and the tuo, or saucer. We don't normally use saucers because we feel like there's not really a good use to them. But if you're looking to steep loose leaf tea in the easiest possible way, the Gaiwan is gonna be your best bet. Now, one thing about Gaiwans is it does take a little bit of time to learn how to steep with them, to control the aperture or the amount of openness on the lid. And this is something you pick up with time though, and honestly, Gaiwans are just the most convenient type of teapot because you can just dump the leaves in between sessions and then you're good to go. Next, we have a tea cake. And a tea cake is just a compressed version of loose leaf tea. It was originally used for high quality tea compressed so that it could be more easily traded for silver or horses. Open loose leaf teas like a big white tea or pu'er with these giant leaves really benefit from being compressed. And it makes them easier to store. Plus, I mean, one of the cool things for me about tea cakes is the cool art that you always get on them. If you have a tea cake though, you need a tea pick or a tea knife to make sure that you can open it up and get the leaves out. More loosely pressed tea is pretty easy just to break the leaves off, but more compressed and denser cakes, you really wanna make sure you have that tea knife to help get in and open up the leaves. The benefit of having a tea knife as opposed to a regular knife is very similar to what you'd get with a letter opener versus a knife. A really fine blade that helps to really separate and open up the thing that you're looking to stab. Stab? You're basically just stabbing it. Our next term is actually gonna be 2 types of tea. The first is pu'er and the second is white tea. These are, I feel like, 2 of the most misunderstood teas, or just honestly not known about teas in the West. There are actually 2 types of teas that fall under the bigger category of pu'er. And the reason for that is because pu'er is just a region. Like in France, they have Champagne, which champagne must be from, so does pu'er. Fresh or raw pu'er is processed more similarly to a green tea, whereas shou or cooked pu'er is processed more like a hei cha. Hei chas are different types of fermented teas in Chinese, and hei literally means black. It's part of the reason why when you hear us referring to what we would call black teas in English, we say red tea, because there's a different category of what they would call black tea in China. So there's 2 types of tea balls, the wrong kind and the right kind. And no, I'm just kidding. The stainless steel tea balls are just kind of a pain to get the leaves out of, but I mean, if that's what you're using for your loose leaf tea, that's cool. But The other type of tea ball is also called a dragon ball, and really what it is just a small amount of tea compressed for a single serving, typically 5 to 8 grams. Alternatively to pressing them into balls, you can do little coins like we've pressed in these. Either way, it doesn't really matter whether it's a tea ball or a tea coin or a tea cracker, which is just the square ones, right? The main thing with this is you're getting a single size serving where you can just toss in your pot. You don't need to do any measuring or breaking like with the tea cake or loose tea. Next, we have sugar. Guys, I'm all for sugar. I love Lipton. I love Bojangles sweet tea. I love kombucha mixed with tea, but this is not the place for sugar. High quality loose leaf tea has character in and of itself, and you don't need to add anything to it to make it taste delicious. It's very similar to a higher quality wine. Sweetness can be an attribute, but the natural sweetness tastes completely different than sugar, and if you add sugar, you're gonna overpower that amazing natural flavor. Next, we have the Gongfu, or the pour cup. This is translated a number of different ways, as the fairness cup, as the justice cup, as the pitcher. We call it a pour cup because, well, that's what it is. It's used for decanting teas, meaning when you wanna stop the steep in your pot, but you're not ready to put it in a cup yet, you pour it into a pour cup. This is because we're doing flash steeps with large amounts of tea, very hot water, and a very small space. You wanna make sure that you can stop the steep exactly when you want it to. These help to do that. Finally, we have a kettle. There's electric kettles, there's clay kettles, there's metal kettles, but one thing that I think people oftentimes misconstrue when talking about tea is the difference between a kettle and a pot. A kettle is used for heating water. A pot is used for brewing or steeping tea. Electric gooseneck kettles are the easiest and most efficient way to make sure you're getting a precise pour when pouring Gongfu style, but there are benefits to other kettles, which we'll talk about in the video that I link here. So you know that a kettle is for heating water and a pot is for steeping tea, but how do you know what the right quality pot is to get for your first teapot? If you check out the link to this video right here, I'll go over how to pick out your first teapot.